I am Matt Wilhelmi. I'm the owner of Strategic Voyages Business Consultants. I'm also the author of Taboo Business Questions, What's Haunting Every Entrepreneur's Growth. And I'm really excited that you're joining us for this second episode with Lindsay Britt. Lindsay's a fractional CMO. She has her MBA from Duke University, specializing in marketing. She specializes in working with companies that are on the supply chain and SaaS side of the business, as well as marketplace companies. And so I just wanted to just say thank you, Lindsay, for joining me again for our second episode here.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
In this episode, Lindsay, we are going to unpack some cautionary tales. And so just to kind of set the stage a little bit, in our first episode together, we did talk a little bit about, your background. And so folks want to check that out. They certainly can in our first episode. We also touched on a case study where this finance company from Florida really had some key issues in their marketing. And so you were great and skillful in kind of helping me diagnose those. But in this episode, we're going to talk about some cautionary tales. And you've given me a little bit of a sneak peek into what they're going to be about. I'm really excited to hear kind of the full story here. But the first one you said was what happens when you're targeting the wrong ICP, the wrong ideal client profile. So I'm excited to hear about that. And the second one you mentioned was, the impact behind behind inconsistent messaging. And so I'm just curious, this first cautionary tale, what happens, when you're targeting that wrong ICP? What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely happy to talk about it. So it's honestly something that is a challenge at every company I've worked at. And it's not something where you define the ICP and then you can just set it and forget it. It's something that you have to continue to iterate on, depending on the business, either quarterly or every 6 months or annually. So one of the companies that I worked for, the target customer was enterprise customers. And I'd say that can be one of the more challenging areas to find your ICP because there are so many different decision makers that are involved in the purchasing process. So in this one company I worked for, we were targeting the executives at the executive level, assuming that they were the decision makers, but they weren't the ones that were actually using the product that we were selling. And so we also had to figure out, okay, how do we target and convey our message and the value to the people who would actually be using the product, but aren't able to make that decision. And so we had started, like I said, targeting the executives. And what happened there is that they didn't understand or have as much knowledge of those pain points that our product was addressing. The ones who really would see the value in the product were the ones who were lower level in the company who were using it day to day. And so our messaging just completely fell flat. And so when that happens, you are wasting your time, you're wasting the executive's time, and your conversion rates are going to be terrible. So we had to figure out a way to basically go to the lower levels, show the value of the product, get them bought in, and help them learn how to influence the actual decision makers who are the final people who sign off on the decision on buying the software, to help them.
Lindsay, I want to pause you just for a second because I think this is really, really fascinating. You had the ICP figured out. You knew what the company was, but you didn't have maybe the person in the company dialed in, right?
Correct. And actually that's a good point to highlight because there were certain industries where it was a little more gray than others. And so thank you for actually asking that, because we found that we could target different industries as well, where the buying process was a little bit simpler, where it was still an enterprise account, but they had a better understanding of the challenges that some of the lower level managers were dealing with than some of the other ones that we targeted.
Yeah, I think that probably happens a lot, right? Yeah. I work with companies and they sometimes tell me about their marketing issues. Not that I ask, but just, it comes up and, they want to know like, well, Matt, like, how come I'm not selling to C-suite executives or how come I'm not, reaching the right target market? And it's like, well, but your messaging, the issues, like you just said, those executives don't even know what those issues are. They're disconnected from it, and it's not their fault, but just like your strategy is targeting a lower level in the organization. So you do kind of have to understand that buying process, which is really fascinating. Just really quick, I want to interject your story because I think, ICPs are really fascinating, ideal client profiles. I actually wrote about marketing in my book, Taboo Business Questions. And again, not that I'm trying to be a marketing expert, but I've seen a lot of these issues. And in my marketing chapter, in my book, the question that kind of leads into it is, how do I know the best way to market my business? Because I think that's different for a lot of different businesses. But in this chapter, I do go into a number of different ICPs, and I actually use ICP in different ways. So ideal client persona is the first one. Later on in the chapter, I do talk about the ideal closing process. Same letters, but it means something a little different. And so you were kind of talking about that, right? With this process of like messaging and sales and issue identification. And so I just felt like that was, related there. But what really happens then? So you had the wrong ICP, you did a little bit of a pivot. Were you able to figure things out?
Yeah, it actually shortened our sales cycle significantly. And I'd say it wasn't right away. There was definitely a few months that were a little bit painful where we weren't hitting our numbers, and it was a lot of testing and talking to a bunch of different people. And we were fortunate that we had some customers already current customers who were very open to talking with us about their process and helping us understand it a bit more, and connecting us with people at other organizations at the same level. So we actually got a little bit lucky too, where we had people move from one of our current customers to someone we were trying to target. And so they brought us along with them and helped us see a little bit more into the new business as well, and apply those learnings and testing them out in that new potential customer as well. So yeah, the impact was shortened sales cycle, better understanding of the value that we're providing, and also being able to we had a couple different services, and understanding the ICP a little bit better actually helped us do some upselling and cross-selling.
Wow, that sounds like a win-win. That's great job, Lindsay, kind of navigating that conversation. And while you were kind of unpacking that cautionary tale, it reminded me of a cautionary tale that I wanted to share. It's a company that I didn't actually finish helping because things kind of fell apart pretty soon into the engagement. And what I mean by that is this really charismatic, down to earth, but also can talk about visionary, big picture stuff, came into my office and had said that he found my blogs and thought, that I was going to be able to help him build his business. But what he wanted to do is he wanted to be a higher quality Yeti product than Yeti. Okay. I'm sure you've heard of Yeti. They're huge. They're known for their quality products.
Yeah.
But he wanted to be a cheaper price point. And he's like, Matt, you're going to help me do this. And I'm like, you are taking on such a hard business problem. I don't know if I can help you. This company Yeti isn't just like a fly by night, just kind of created out of their garage type of company. They have executives flying to Japan and flying to China and going around the world to get the very best zippers and vacuum sealed products. And not to mention their marketing is amazing. And so you're talking about like a humongous endeavor. Do you have like millions of dollars to invest in this business? And he's like, well, I thought maybe, I could do it for try out a few zippers and try out a couple of products and really kind of, do a pilot launch with a couple of test products. And so we did. He invested the money. I found some suppliers. I found the same suppliers that Yeti uses. Okay. I found them in China, got him to order a couple of prototypes. But we got them back. And when you're only ordering like 3 or 4 of a product, it's just, you're not going to get the same kind of quality. And especially when you're asking them to do it for cheaper, they use cheaper stuff. And so it just didn't really work. It was a little bit of a disconnect, but I wanted to tell that story because I think that it's sometimes when you're talking to somebody who's really passionate about it, this guy was over the top passionate about his idea. He's like, I know I can do it. I know I can do it. And I'm not saying that he couldn't ever do it, but the budget just wasn't even in the same ballpark. And so, unfortunately, I don't win every, engagement. Sometimes they do go a little bit sideways. I knew kind of going into this one that it wasn't probably going to work out. And so I really tried to keep my billable rates very low because I don't want to take advantage of somebody like that. I think that he was maybe trying to get a little bit over his skis. And so I appreciate letting me tell that story. I haven't told that one before, but it certainly came to mind. He had this idea of being a better quality at a lower price point against a behemoth of a company. and just like, that's not super realistic. So
Yeah, that's
has that ever happened to you where that, you're meeting with somebody and they're just like very excited, but like, it's just maybe not really you can already see it not going right.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's really fun too to talk to those entrepreneurs, because I'd say a lot of entrepreneurs aren't successful with their first ideas, but that passion is still really there, that drive to solve a problem. And so I love when they're still willing to kind of dig in and test it out and try something, because even if it fails, they've learned from it. And I found that truly successful entrepreneurs are always going to be entrepreneurs, and they're going to really continue to try other ideas and different things and apply whatever they learned and whatever didn't work to their next venture. So yeah, I definitely talk to people. I'm like, oh, I don't really think that's gonna work out. I don't say that to them because I love their excitement. Or if I do say that, I say it in a very data driven way. So there's no hard feelings in any way. But yeah, it's nothing abnormal, I don't think.
Yeah, I remember right before I asked him, if he was really kind of serious about this, I did ask him, how much money he was willing to lose, because I think that's an important question that maybe he wasn't even thinking I would ask. But I just had to ask, because if you think about Yeti, right? Like, they've probably invested billions of dollars in their product line and in research and in marketing and in supply chain, and like billions. And so, I was just curious what his number was going to be. I think he said it was like 30 grand. I'm like, okay, well, like, that's cute. Like, that's like not really going to work. But like, if that's what you're willing to do, like, we'll see how far I can take you for that amount of money. Most of that money, by the way, went into the actual product. I think I might've made a little bit on it, but kind of going into it, knowing that. I'd love to switch gears to your second cautionary tale. You kind of mentioned that there's these issues that come up when companies have inconsistent messaging. And so what happens when an organization has a sales cycle, but maybe there's an inconsistent messaging throughout? What does that look like?
Yeah, and it's actually one of the things that I dive into first when I approach a new client, as really, there's inconsistent messaging, usually because there's confusion within the organization about the value they're really providing. And so I try to start at the very beginning and have, I've had the support of a couple other fractional marketers while I've been getting started, or when I was getting started doing fractional business, which I'm so grateful for. And there's this nice framework that you can go through of identifying, okay, identify kind of three core values that the value adds that you're providing, or it's not definitely not features, but what are the benefits, and what problem are those solving? And then once you identify what those problems are solving, then you can better identify, okay, what is your actual positioning? How are you going to tell that story to the market? And you have to have buy-in, definitely at the executive level team, but across the organization, before you do any type of marketing campaign. Because what'll happen is, if you have one group of marketing, if you have marketing, for example, going out and saying the value that we're providing is A, and then that customer comes in and they go to sales, and sales is talking about value number B. There's a lot of confusion there from the customer standpoint and the prospect standpoint, saying, wait, I thought you were going to solve problem A, and the value that I want is value A, but here you're talking about value B. Why am I even talking to you? And so the conversion rates can drop. Now, even if there's some consistency between sales and marketing per se, so they're both pushing value A, someone signs on, they either go through onboarding or they're talking to the customer success team and they're pushing value B. Like, this is what we're known for. This is how we're going to help you. There's a lot of, there'll be confusion again with the customer saying, wait, why did I sign on? You're not providing the value I thought you were. This isn't necessarily who I thought you were. Now, those are all extreme cases. And that I do want to differentiate between potentially upselling or cross-selling, or talking about additional values that you could provide to the customer, either in the sales cycle or from customer success. That's definitely not off limits. But at the core, you still should have consistent understanding about what problem you're solving for your ICP. And that should be very clear in every type of messaging that goes out to the customers and prospects.
Do you see that happen? I know you just kind of talked about the life cycle or the sales cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
The organization maybe doesn't have that consistent messaging. But do you also see it even maybe more on the surface level where somebody Googles something thinking that they're going to get one kind of solution, they go to the landing page and it doesn't match at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What happens there? They're just throwing their money away?
Yeah, I mean, even if you think about it at a very specific one marketing campaign, you're driving a prospect to your website based on whatever they read on, whether it was that display ad or whoever they got to your landing page. Then they get to their landing page and the messaging is completely different. The drop-off rate and the bounce rate is going to be huge, and your conversion rates are going to be significantly lower. And so, yeah, even at the campaign level, it's incredibly important for sure to make sure that. And I will say within marketing, that's a great place to test different messaging, but not necessarily just across the organization, but even across campaigns and things like that. Here's what the positioning should be. And especially in startups, you're constantly testing new messaging, but there has to be that consistency across the campaign as well as across the organization.
Yeah, I would also think that it needs to be for a longer period of time than just like we tried it once and it worked or it didn't work. Because then you're kind of saying, well, we either got lucky or we didn't get lucky. But like, if you kind of test that same campaign for a long period of time, you're able then to kind of see the effect of continuous marketing messages and almost like programming people to associate a certain solution to a certain problem with a certain brand, right? And so you kind of need to do that a lot to maybe get people in some of those longer sales cycles. It might take more than just one time that they see the ad before they click on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, I wouldn't say it's necessarily just time, but it's also just volume of eyeballs on the messaging. So if you are targeting an SMB type of client or even a consumer type of client, you could have so many people click through something or have impressions on a certain type of messaging, and you'll know within a week or two potentially of whether or not that's working. Whereas, like you said, a longer sales cycle, it could take a lot longer because it's just getting in front of fewer people. And you also have to wait to see what the actual implications of it with a longer sales cycle are. So, okay, maybe it worked for marketing and they became an MQL, and then do they become an SQL? How long does it take to get there? And then, okay, do they actually convert? And then what's their lifetime value? Are certain customers churning with certain messaging more so than others? And when it's a longer sales cycle, it's a lot harder to do that quick testing and try things. So you do have to test it a lot longer.
And so from the finance perspective, right? Because I get to kind of, usually evaluate these campaigns from the finance perspective. And it's almost like, wait a minute, you spent how much money? And we still don't really know if we're getting any output from here. And so what I'm hearing is from these cautionary tales, the first one was, kind of targeting this wrong ICP. And then the second one was, the wrong messaging or inconsistent messaging across the sales cycle. I would imagine it's like a tremendous amount of money wasted trying marketing. And I know that in marketing, there is a little bit of testing, you didn't really mention it, but there's typically like A/B testing or, maybe different messaging tactics. But what you're talking about is like an overall organizational breakdown. And that just like sounds like an insane amount of money lost. So it kind of hurts my heart to hear that there are businesses out there that haven't figured this out. I hope they reach out to you because it sounds like you're able to kind of fix these problems.
Yeah. And I'd say one of the things to know too, I mean, a lot of times when I join, you still have an idea of what sells and what will convert people. And I'd say if you don't have any customers, the issue is product market fit. I think no matter what your positioning is, if you have I wouldn't say no matter what, but what I'd like to do is and I work with the CFO typically on this, is I say, okay, I want to have 80% of the budget for marketing going towards channels and things that we know work. And then I leave about 10 to 20% of the budget for testing. And so that way you don't have. That
would make me very happy, by the way, if I had a marketing executive tell me that.
Yeah. And I would say it's not always feasible with very early stage companies because they don't have the data to know what those 80% of things are that work. But the budget's usually a lot smaller too at that point. But yeah, so you try your best as a marketer you never feel like you're wasting money because you're learning, but yeah, you have to be careful, especially now where profitability is so much more important than growing at all costs. And so that's kind of what I like to suggest, that the 80% is on, okay, these are things that we are more confident will work. And then that 10 to 20% on testing new channels or completely new messaging or new things.
One of the things I tell CEOs when they're evaluating me or my team and kind of helping them with their business is that I do need to kind of meet the CMO and just like understand what they're doing. If I can at least talk to them, if they're personable, if they're, transparent, because nobody likes a CFO who comes in and only wants to cut costs. That's like the first thing that a lot of CFOs do is, okay, well, we need to fire some people. We got to cut marketing. It's like, okay, well, wait a minute. Like things were working, a little bit before you got here. And so for me, if I can build a great partnership with a CMO like yourself in an organization where we're on the same page, we understand budgets or risk, and because what you kind of talked about is not experimenting, but it is more of a scientific approach to diversifying the marketing strategies. That sounds great, but let's not use 80% of the budget to experiment. Let's use a very small amount, 10 to 20%, to test some things out. And I would love to see those results, because I want to be that CFO that works with an organization where we're growing revenue and we're building budgets and we're having more money to spend on marketing, because you've got a proven marketing strategy that now all we have to do is pour more gas on it, put more money into it, and the business takes off. That would be a dream come true, I think, for a lot of CEOs. So Lindsay, I do want to kind of wrap up this episode. You've been really gracious with your time. And so just to kind of recap where we're at, we're almost done with the second episode. But in our third episode together, we're going to dive right back into our case study that we initially presented in the first episode. And so to remind folks of what that issue was, or the issues, I should say, it was with a finance company in Florida. I was brought in to kind of help them do a valuation model for their business. And so through that, kind of understood that they had some marketing issues, and Lindsay was kind enough to really kind of figure out what specifically those issues were. And so the first one that she identified was that there was like almost a lack of clearly defined ideal client personas or profiles, and that wasn't really accepted throughout the organization. It just wasn't really clear. The second issue was a lack of a consistent process. The founder was kind of doing everything. There wasn't really accountability for sales with the other sales reps that were more partners in the firm. And the third one was no real marketing. And to Lindsay's credit, she was nice enough not to solve those issues just yet. We're going to get into the solutions here in our third episode, because these issues are things that Lindsay and her team, when she goes into an organization as a CMO, deals with all the time. These are not unique issues. It's not like she's never seen them before. And so I'm really excited to kind of hear what those strategies are going to look like in our third episode. So I hope you stay tuned. Thanks.